Hello, friends. Welcome to Knowledge Valley. Today, we are going to have a discussion on the editorials of The Hindu, and the date is May 27th, 2020. Some of interesting editorials today are oil price pickle, the increased duty on fuel can fund welfare, but arbitrary methods will have implications. It is on the oil price. Second is the heavy burden of social suffering. The misery the pandemic has caused to the poor points to the horrendous ways in which societies are organized. The next editorial is on United States politics. The common factor: China is now a dominant subject in United States politics as the election draws closer. Continue India's tryst with the Nehruvian ideology. It remains essential even today to fight against the dark forces of communalism and to kindle the light of harmony. Today is the anniversary of death of our first Prime Minister, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, and this editorial is written by A. Raja. How India can become self reliant. There needs to be significant government reinvestment in public sector undertakings and research and development. A time to reform courts is another editorial today. An effective lockdown. This is a response given by the minister. So we are going to see a response of the minister given to an earlier editorial. And we have over here social distancing. That's Shramik Express. Then you have rice, chana, stranded migrants, quarantine, jobs. Oil price pickle. The increased duty on fuel can fund welfare, but arbitrary methods will have implications. So recently, our petroleum minister Dharmendra Pradhan had remarked that center is taking cautious and conscious approach of ensuring a balance in fuel prices and aims to use the resultant for welfare. But the 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 government, the minister is saying that it is charging the people, it is putting taxes on the people so that it can take the money and use it for the welfare of the people. But it exactly what it is? With global prices still about 45% lower than 2019 closing levels, despite coordinated supply cuts by major producers, India had an opportunity to pass on the benefits to consumers. What we have to understand is today the oil prices are deregulated. Deregulated meaning the government can't control the prices. So it depends on the oil companies on what they want to charge. If the markets, that is the international markets, the oil prices is less, the oil companies will charge less. And if the oil prices are high, the oil companies will charge high. But is it exactly what the policy says? This is just in paper. Recently, we have seen that compared to the 2019 prices, the oil prices have come down drastically, 45% lower than 2019 prices. But has it been seen in our in the oil prices that we have? The answer is no. So this is what the petroleum minister was saying, that oil prices is seen cautiously and consciously. So they have a cautious and conscious approach. And it is understandable because the government of India needs money so that it can do welfare of the people. But at the moment, we must understand that there is no demand for oil prices. The transport is not working. So it would have been better if the government of India wouldn't have thought on those lines to keep the prices of the petrol high, because any which ways people are not using uh, the petrol or their vehicles. Secondly, subsequent to the latest increase, the center's tax revenue on 1 liter of petrol sold in IOC in uh, Delhi as on May 16 was 1.8 times the fuel's freight inclusive base price of 18.28. What does this mean is, in the international market, the base price of oil is 18.28. 46% was the 46%, the total price, the base price is 18.28. If you add transportation, it should come to around 30 to 40 rupees, but the prices which we are getting it is around 71 rupees, 71.26 in Delhi. So if you notice, 46% is just the actual price of the petroleum, that is the base price plus transport and the other cost. Rest all the other costs are taxes. So this is what the editorial is trying to say. With economic activity brought to a near standstill by the lockdown, the center's overall revenue prospects have come under severe strain. So as we know, center is wanting to get taxes and trying to get money so that they can use it for the welfare, and it has no other methods rather than these methods, like the increase in the petrol prices. But is it of any sense? The answer is no. Still, the fact that the government has consciously tinkered with the duty structure through recent years of largely less oil prices undermines the benefits from pricing deregulation that ought to have accrued to oil companies and consumers. So there was no logic in deregulating it if the government only had to do all these tinkering and the twisting of the oil prices. So there was no point in deregulation. That is what the editorial is trying to say. We can also see, so the first aspect was during the COVID-19, that is the recent past. We can also see back in 2018, before the key assembly elections, the center had cut the excise duty at a time when global crude oil prices was high. So when oil prices was high, the center had cut down the duty because there were elections later. The government's goal of maximizing revenue from fuel products to fund welfare measures can only bear fruit if the demand of petrol is increasing. So if there is demand of petrol which is increasing, then only they will get the fruits of high prices. Plus, you're using it, you're cutting the excise duty and you're putting the excise duty as per your wish. So there is no proper policy on increasing or decreasing or deregulating the oil prices. So there is no proper policy. Now, what is the impact of all this? Okay, the government is planning to sell some stake of BPCL. Okay, in the future, if the government wants to privatize these oil companies, they will not get good prices because the outside companies are seeing that there is no proper policy in pricing of the oil prices here. So how will a outside company or how will any private company come and invest in such companies like the government companies of BPCL? And that will lead to less prices for BPCL, and the private companies will give less price and buy big stake. So add to the fact that the center's ambitious disinvestment target of 2.1 lakh crore for the fiscal had included a stake in BPCL, and petroleum products pricing approach gets even more complicated. With potential investors unlikely to be impressed by the lack of autonomy in the sector, it is government's interest not to risk the health of the goose that lays the golden eggs. So what is the editorial trying to say? That we should have a proper policy for the pricing, and see to it that these oil companies make some money according to the demand and supply in the market, and there should be a standard sustainable way of uh, running the oil companies. The next article we are going to see is how India can become self reliant. It is written by D. Raghunandan. There needs to be a significant government reinvestment in public sector undertaking and research and development. So the focus of the article is public sector undertaking and research and development. So who is D. Raghunandan? So D. Raghunandan is with the Delhi Science Forum, affiliated to the All India People's Science Network. Now, what does the article say? Now, it again relates with the COVID 19, that during the COVID 19, India, especially the Prime Minister, was of concern that we are not producing much. We depend on others for all our essential needs. So, Mr. Modi had said there needs to be improvement in quality and domestic supply chains going forward. If this is to happen, though, India will have to make major course changes in development strategies. So, we need to make improvement in quality and domestic supply chains. Many things have changed from the Nehruvian era. We know when India got independence, we took up the mixed form of economy where public sector as well as the private sector was given focus on. Self reliance in state run heavy industries was followed, and strategic sectors in the decades following independence have placed India ahead of most of the developing countries. So, state run heavy industries were important. All the important strategic industries were given to the state. So, as I have told you, we followed public sector and private sector model. This was the Nehruvian way of the economy, that is a mixed economy, where the state, that is the public sector, will lead and the private sector will be taken ahead with the public sector. It was also according to the Bombay Plan. Little effort was made to modernize the light industries or develop contemporary consumer products. So, from the second, we have 5 year plans. From the second 5 year plan, focus was on the heavy industries, not much on the light industries or consumer products. India completely missed out on the third industrial revolution. So we know the industrial revolution started in 1750. We are currently in the age of the fourth industrial revolution of artificial intelligence. In the third industrial revolution, comprising electronic goods, microprocessors, personal computers, mobile phones, and decentralized manufacturing and global value chains during the so called lost decade. So we were out of this. Today, India is the biggest market for smartphones, but we do not make even one smartphone in our country. At turn of millennium, when India embarked on liberalization, privatization, globalization, that is the LPG, self-reliance as a concept was rubbished in the belief that it was tantamount to reinventing the wheel when advanced technologies could be simply brought from somewhere else at low prices. So we focused on bringing advanced technology from outside rather than we developing from inside. The first public sector undertakings, PSUs, are by definition inefficient. So what things came into our mind during this LPG? So first of all, we will take things from outside rather than racking our brains inside and developing things inside. And there were some concepts, or there were some things in our mind. First was that public sector undertakings are by definition inefficient and sluggish. So they are not of any use. This is after the LPG. No effort was made to engender either real autonomy or transition to new technological directions. So in the public sector units, no efforts was done to make them more better and increase their technology. No research and development was done. On the other hand, private sector also displayed little interest in the heavy industries. So this is the problem which we are currently facing. With entry of foreign corporations, most Indian private companies retreated to technology imports. So we only focused on imports. Even today, most of the R&D is done by the outside countries. Is conducted by PSUs, and much of the smaller is done by the uh, countries which is foreign corporations, whereas the private industries or the private companies in our country are not doing research and development, not focusing on research and development. So this is the first idea, that public sector units are not that useful. No focus on the research and development. Private sector believes in taking things from outside. The second was that inviting foreign direct investment and manufacturing by foreign majors would bring new technologies into India's industrial ecosystem. And the second mindset was FDIs and manufacturing from outside, they will bring better technologies and help in India's growth. However, mere setting up of manufacturing facilities in India is no guarantee of bringing of technology. There is no evidence from any sector that this has been done. The fact is, foreign majors jealously jealously guard commercially significant or strategic technologies. So that the whole concept that they'll bring technology from outside is flawed. The key problem of self reliance is therefore neither external finance nor domestic offshore manufacturing, but resolute indigenous endeavor including R&D, that is focus mainly on research and development. So it's not the finance from outside, it's not the companies inside, it's focus on the research and development. That is how we'll get self reliance. Let's see examples of various countries. Experience and achievements in other countries in Asia attest to this and also contradict the notion that self reliance is a hangover from Nehruvian socialism. So, various countries across the world has focused on self reliance, and it is not the hangover from Nehruvian socialism. As we had seen during Nehru's time, we had followed socialism so that we can save our infant industries and protect it, grow from within, and then start uh, opening the markets. So let's see the experience from the other countries. Learning from the first country is Japan's post-war success, and also South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, and Hong Kong took huge technological and industrial strides in 1970s and 80s. South Korea in particular climbed determinedly up the technology ladder and value chains in electronic goods, consumer goods, etc., automobiles. So today we know South Korea is so famous. Samsung is a very important brand today. It emerged as a global powerhouse in manufacturing, but also in indigenously developed technologies. Their focus was technology. Taiwan developed technologies and manufacturing capacities in robotics and microprocessors, while Singapore and Hong Kong adopted advanced technologies in niche areas. These self reliant capabilities were enabled, among other factors, by planned state investments in R&D, that is research and development, 3 to 5% of GDP. So just remember, they put 3 to 5% of GDP in research and development. That is how they could grow. Countries like Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Vietnam. Today we are seeing Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam. They are growing. So what is their strategy? How come they are growing? So they follow mostly on offshore manufacturing, lower down the value chain, and without the thrust on self-reliance. So they focus more on offshore manufacturing, means they take orders from countries abroad on low value chain and at a very low price, and their focus is not self-reliance, but it is good for job generation. This is not suitable for country like India. We have a vast uh, market, we have vast people who can work. So this is not the same thing. China is of course unique. Reason is, initially you must have noticed China, they had followed a strategy where initially they focused on lower value chain. Their goods were not that great, quality was not that good, they flooded the market. Now they are going towards the higher value goods. It has now decided shifting to advanced manufacturing and has set itself a target of becoming a super world leader by 2025 35 in 5G, supercomputing, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, etc. So from, you can say, small toys or small things, plastic things here and there, now it is talking about 5G, supercomputing, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence. So this is China's model. The way forward for India. Unfortunately, India may have well missed the bus in case of the third industrial revolution, in which the US, Europe, and China have established leadership. Yet, self reliant capabilities in electric and fuel vehicles, uh, electricity storage systems, solar cells and modules, aircraft including UAVs, artificial intelligence, robotic, etc., can be done. So, though people might say that we might have missed the bus, but not everything is lost. So large scale endeavors would have required, since self reliance is not happening by itself. So it doesn't. So we need to work a lot, since self reliance doesn't happen automatically. State funded R&D, including in basic research by PSUs and research institutions and universities, needs to be scaled up significantly. Currently it is just 1% of GDP. So currently states investment in research or universities, institutions is just 1%. We must have seen 3 to 5% by the other countries. Upgraded and reoriented PSUs would also be crucial. Private sector needs to be delivery oriented, and they should give a delivery oriented R&D, could also be supported. Finally, India's meager public expenditure on education needs to be substantially ramped up. No country has achieved self reliance without mass quality public education, and no country has developed without much stronger public health system. So, focus has to be research and development, focus has to be education, focus has to be health. So, we have seen how we can have an Atmanirbhar Bharat, what was the problem, how we can learn from other countries, and finally what India needs to focus on. Next article is actually a response given by Minister of State for Home Affairs G. Kishan Reddy. He is the MP of Secunderabad. So this is from directly from the government. So very good articles, and even the government speaks to the people through the Hindu. What is the response? An effective lockdown. India's containment strategy has been successful. So this was in response to the article which was written on May 20th. Let's see what the minister has to say. So this is the government side of the story. This is what news is all about. Give the story of the opposition and the government so that we can have a balanced approach. Lives versus livelihoods. India's lockdown and its enforcement has been one of the most structured exercise globally. So what this editorial is trying to first say is what the response, that is the minister, wants to say is the lockdown saved lives. There are many criticism on the lockdown. Is the lockdown good? Was it happening? Is it needed? Is it successful? So the minister is saying the lockdown actually helped save lives. The same without proper lockdown in Italy, it was completely chaos. The minister says thousands tried to flee North Italy and carried the infection to other regions. In contrast, the aim of the Prime Minister's announcement was to ensure that virus doesn't spread to the villages. So if it was a, the minister is saying if it was a planned one, if the Prime Minister would have given time for the people to arrange for themselves, then people would have run helter skelter and the virus would have moved from various one place to another. So this is the minister who's trying to say all this. So during the lockdown, the government's goal was to elevate the hardship of the people, and that is the poor and vulnerable, by providing free food grain. What is the government? So he's then answering, what has the government done in the lockdown for helping the people? So free food grain was given by the PDS. So 2 3 days we had talked about yesterday, day before yesterday, we had talked about the PDS, that is public distribution system, direct benefit transfer. Yesterday I had discussed an article with you about the liquidity push. Is the government doing enough? So you should see the articles which was there earlier. 41 crore have been received through financial assistance. 52,000 crores in the Prime Minister, that is Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan package. Invocation of the Disaster Management Act permits state governments to use the funds available in the state disaster response funds for all expenses. Thus, any attempts to blame the railways in accounting for operational expense while plying Shramik trains is grossly ill informed. So he's also trying to say that the states were given all the rights to use the money that they have, so we can't put the full blame on the railways. So the government has given 41 crore people, they have received the financial assistance of 52,000. There is Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana. The railways is doing their bit. Even the disaster management act has been invoked. The state has to remove some money. The lockdown saw union government and state governments come together. The Prime Minister held 5 meetings with the Chief Minister. So it is not that the Prime Minister is using all these things according to his own will. He has been meeting and speaking to the Chief Ministers. The twin goals of self-reliance. Then we talk about he talks about the twin goal of self-reliance. We just spoke to the in the article earlier, and even yesterday. Self-reliance was to control their outcomes. So self-reliance in India is of two goals. First is to control the outcomes, and self-reliance of the nation is to control their destiny. So first is self-reliance of citizens, that is to control the outcomes, and self-reliance of nation to control their destiny. For our aspirational classes, the economic package, so we know that 20 lakh crore package, the outcomes they set for themselves. Opportunities are being provided in terms of loans to start and sustain their livelihoods. The package also aims to reskill our workers. So even yesterday we had seen the Niti Aayog Rajiv Kumar coming and talking about giving loans and direct benefit transfer and Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana and Kisan Aay scheme, etc. Okay. As a country, self-reliance is a concerted effort to build institutional capacities. So self-reliance only not means giving money. It is to make institutions sustainable so that in future we don't have any problems. So today we might, what the minister is trying to say, today we might just put in money, give money here and there everywhere. But is it going to be of long-term importance? Is it going to be of long-term use? More than 1 crore poor families have had access to quality health. Technology enabled governance initiatives such as DBT have been uh, done. Leadership at the top is single most enabling factor for building such self-reliance and resilience. So talking about the leadership by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In 2014, the finance minister had said that investment and consumption are two kinds of expenditure. So the May 20 was written by the previous finance minister, and he had criticized the current government. May 20 article written by previous finance minister, and he had criticized the government, and he is telling that this same prime minister who is finance minister who is criticizing had initially said two types of expenditure, that is investment and consumption. Okay, so the making of the Central Vista project is the project which the government is trying to do in the parliament area, where in Delhi, Lutyens Delhi, they are trying to make a new parliament and the new Rashtrapati Bhavan, etc. And so many people had criticized the government, saying that why are you wasting the money on non-priority things? So this minister is trying to say that that the government is trying to actually create jobs, boost economy, and build capital assets. So the government led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi embraces criticism. However, it is duty bound to set the record straight when falsehoods and intellectual dishonesty are mainstreamed as opinions. So this is G. Kishan Reddy. He's the minister. So we have it from the horse's mouth. So the minister is coming and telling the government stand, and this is the duty of any newspaper and any news media to show these things. The Hindu is very objective in this manner. The next editorial is a time for reforms in courts. The Supreme Court can move away from an oral hearing based system to one based on written submission. So today's time we have coronavirus and everything is going online, like the newspapers that we are discussing online and the newspapers we are getting online. So even the Supreme Court should be doing its process, even things like filing the complaints, everything online. So we are going to see what are the changes that the um, writers are asking for. So it is written by V.V. Sivakumar and Chitranshul Sinha. They are the partners at Dua Associates, Advocates and Solicitors. Okay, so this is some advice given to Supreme Court to change according to the situations. So the pandemic has turned the whole world on its head. No aspect of life has escaped. This includes the functioning of courts and judiciary. So a lot has been written earlier also how the court should change its infrastructure so that the court can move to video conference hearings as the norm. However, any such move without law is futile. In subordinate courts and high courts, a significant time of daily proceedings is wasted in adjournments, where the lawyers and the various parties come and ask for adjournments. So, both as a response to this crisis as well as the medium term, this system can be done away with. A system needs to be devised where cases are not listed before the courts unless all the documents are filed. So then you can't ask for adjournment because there are no documents which is not filed. So the existing infrastructure is enough to enable this. Listing can be done before the court only in cases requiring urgent interim intervention from the court, while the matter is pending procedural completion after verification of urgency by a judicial officer or a judge upon oral or written application. So the first thing is the adjournment, and especially adjournment related to papers. So all the papers need to be filed, it needs to be checked by the judicial officers or a judge, and then only it should be listed, rather than everyday listing and the lawyers coming and saying the court needs to be adjourned because they have not filed so and so paper. So this is one procedure which needs to be looked at. Second, when courts reopen apart from fresh cases, only a limited number of cases which are ripe for arguments can be posted. So this can be done with sufficient notice to the bar associations that request for adjournments. This will ensure that courtrooms are not crowded. Circulation of the cases to be listed in advance will give advocates enough time to take instructions from clients and prepare for arguments. So second important is proper timetables should be set, and few cases which are needing urgent arguments need to be set so that the people are not surrounded or crowded in the courtrooms. So first is the adjournment, second is the crowding of the courts. Supreme Court 2013 should amend provisions relating to the special leave petitions. So third thing that the Supreme Court needs to see is the special leave petitions. Special leave petitions is what is it? It's a quasi judicial, or you can say it's a right where people can take the cases which are not, means there is no judgment in the case, straight away you can take it to the Supreme Court. But again, it is on the discretion of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court grants leave to appeal if the petition raises a question of law. When can the people ask to take a case from the lower courts directly to the Supreme Court without the judgment? It is only if there is a question of law. Now, what has happened is there are so many petitions in front of the Supreme Court asking the court to take up their cases. So reports show that about 60 to 70% of the Supreme Court's docket, out of this 80 to 90% SLPs are dismissed, which means only 10 to 20% are the cases which raise a question of questions of law. So this takes up a lot of time. So many cases are pending, and out of which 80 to 90% are, 60 to 70% are special leave petitions, out of which 80 to 90% are dismissed. A simple solution would be to do away with immediate oral hearings of SLBs. The Supreme Court rules could be amended to provide for a structure of preparing of SLPs. Every special leave petition, that is SLPs, must be accompanied by an application for oral hearing, which must be decided first by the court and then two in the chambers. To assist the court for that, a cadre of judicial research assistants made up of qualified lawyers should be created. So how can this SLPs should form? The maker a cadre of assistants. Therefore, thereafter the court may or may not allow applications of oral hearing based on whether such questions of law merit at its attention. Only such SLPs in which oral hearing is permitted should be listed for hearing. SLPs in which no questions of law are raised or frivolous ones are raised should be dismissed without oral hearing and upon imposing costs. So, to punish the people who are bringing frivolous SLPs, just wasting the time of the court. This will ensure that only meritorious SLPs will get judicial attention. So, make a cadre and ask them to look after the SLPs, and then Supreme Court will take the urgent ones and more genuine ones. No filing reply to appeals. So first we saw adjournment, then we saw the crowding at the court, then we saw the SLPs. Now no filing reply to appeals. Even in cases of statutory appeals and appeals where there is SLPs, the court should do away with system of filing reply to the appeals and rejoinders to such replies. Every case can be decided based on the records of the subordinate courts. As no new arguments on facts can be raised before the court in appeals, the system of filing additional pleadings should be rendered redundant, as pleadings are simply regulation sorry uh, regulation of the records of the subordinate courts. Most such appeals can be dwelled upon by judges and their research assistants in chamber, and only such appeals should be granted detailed hearings where the judges require clarifications. So mostly what happens is, when there is statutory appeals, okay, no witness is called, there is no case, there is no hearings, and looking at the lower judges or lower courts judgments, the upper courts, they try to give their own judgments. So all this takes time, so there needs to be a lot of um, help by cadres or assistance which can be brought in to help the courts regarding these judgments. The above mechanism will ensure that Supreme Court moves away from an oral hearing based system to a written submission based one.